Jurists.
Sí, sí, yo no me da cuenta.
Yeah, you're right. The organization is very well. Congratulations
Yes,
to your colleagues.
Yeah, my team
Yes.
has worked.
Yes.
Really, really hard.
And there is already 150 people online, so
Yes,
it's
they told me. Yeah.
it's very
That's
good,
great.
very good.
No, no,
Well, please. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Joaquín Pérez. I'm the head of the International Department at the Spanish Data Protection Authority. I think you can hear me. Is correct? Okay. Well, I would like to say welcome to all of you to this special event we are organized today jointly with ENISA and the Spanish Data Protection Authority to talk about European data spaces. So today will be a very intensive day. There will be some panels here. The panels are going to be transmitted by streaming. And after lunch, will be the morning before lunch. After lunch, we are going to have a special session with 8 working tables in parallel that will be in another room close to here, and to talk about specific topics about the data spaces under the perspective of GDPR and the privacy and data protection. So I would like first to thank you to the organization that have participated in this event, that contribute to the event today. We have a representative from the European Commission, also from the Joint Research Center of the European Union, the European Digital Rights. We have also representatives from different data protection authorities, the EDPS, the DPA of the Länder of Schleswig-Holstein from Germany, and also from other data protection, Catalonia Data Protection Authority and Andalusian Data Protection Authority from Spain. Also members from the Luxembourg National Data Service, also from different ministries of Spain, the Spanish Ministry of Transport and the Spanish Ministry of Agriculture, Fishing and Food, and also the Secretary of State for Digitalization and Artificial Intelligence. We have also representatives for the Institute of Biomedicine of Sevilla, and also from the academia, the Tibur Law School, the Valencia University. Thank you for. But here in the room, everybody listen to me? Okay. So the problem is not here. I'm not here. Okay. Can I carry on? Yeah, okay, thank you. So I was just related to the different institutions that participate. I said that also that we have representatives from the academia, the Tibur Law School, the Valencia University, and the National University in Spain for Educación a Distancia, the UNED. Also from different associations, ISMS Forum and the Future of Privacy Forum. Also consultant company like Rite and Cullen International. I hope I have mentioned everyone and I haven't forgotten anyone. Well, having said that, I would like to just to give a brief overview of what we expected this morning. We are going to start with the opening talks with our 2 main speakers, Mar España and Prokopios Drokakis. I'm going to introduce them later. And then we are going to have some panels. we are going to go from top to the bottom. We are going to start with a panel titled, Why do we speak about GDPR in data space? Because this is the aim of the Congress. Later, we are going to continue having an overview of the initiative of the European data spaces. We are going to have a coffee break, and after the coffee break, we are going to have a panel related with the interplay between the GDPR and the different legal regulations in the European Union, like the Data Act, Data Market Act, Data Service Act, European Health Data Space, Artificial Intelligence Regulation, etc. We are going to continue later with a panel dedicated to data spaces at the national level. As I mentioned, we are going to go from the general Europe to the national level. After this panel, we are going to have the lunch, and then a final panel dedicated to data protection by design and by default to check one of the special key points of the GDPR applied to data spaces. After that, I think the transmission through streaming is going to finish, and we are going to have the 8 table in parallel, working table in parallel, that I mentioned before, will be in another room. The people are going to be divided in groups. So any of you can choose in which group do you want to engage and to work on it. And then we are going to finish with the conclusion after these 8 parallel sessions. So in order not to bore you, we are going to start just with the opening ceremony. And for that, I would like to introduce you our 2 first speakers. First, Mar España Martín. She is the director of the Spanish Data Protection Authority. Mar España holds a university degree in law from ICADE University. She is a university expert in management of not-profit entities from Luis Vives Foundation. She holds a master on international protection and human rights from the University of Alcalá de Henares, Madrid, and a master in mindfulness and research in health context from the Complutense University of Madrid. She was General Secretary of the Institute of Women. She was also General Secretary of the Spanish Ombudsman, and finally, Vice Minister of Presidency and Public Administration in the regional government of Castilla-La Mancha. Since July 2015, she is the director of the Spanish Data Protection Authority, and nobody knows for how long. I hope she continues with us for a long time. So, Mar España, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Joaquin, for this kind of presentation. And thank you for all of you for the interest that you have shown to come to this event. It's not working? Okay.
Should I switch off? Yeah.
Everything works? Okay. And I would like to thank all my team for all the effort that they have been doing for several months to organize this event. We have a high interest in this meeting because we are totally involved in offering security in open data spaces. We are working at the European and different international levels. Only in Europe, we are working in more than 20 open data spaces. So I would like to just to give a general framework, because I know that there will be very interesting panels after our opening works. The best way to start an event of this relevance cannot be other than giving thanks to those who have made this meeting possible, starting with ENISA, and in particular Procopio's team, that since the conception of this project has been involved with the necessary enthusiasm to make possible this encounter between practically the entire spectrum of stakeholders that in the short to medium term will be involved in data spaces. I would also like to thank the presence of control authorities, ministries, universities, entities of the private technological and research sectors, associations and entities of the legal sector that are represented here, who in short are a representative part of the sectors that will be involved in the ecosystem of data spaces. In this list of thanks, I also want to include the support received by the entire team of the national agency, in particular the team of our General Secretariat, led by Cristina Lopez. Undoubtedly, the response received to this new call from the agency and ENISA is an expression of the part of entities that will necessarily be part of the roles that will finally be integrated into the data spaces, which highlights the complexity of the new ecosystem of data access, sharing and marks a horizon of advances for our society unprecedented to date. In the data spaces, we land a good part of the present and future technologies, and this is where the GDPR comes to highlight the need for a more solid and coherent framework for data protection in the European Union, backed by a strict enforcement given the importance of generating trust in citizens that allows the digital economy to develop throughout the internal market, providing our society with benefits related to all sectors of well-being. The development of data spaces must be associated with new advances in privacy. The development, for example, the compute-to-data strategies, the federated processing, differential privacy, or the generation of synthetic data. There are many initiatives and new lines of activity that may arise in data spaces. However, from the design of those, from their conception, the rights and freedoms of natural persons whose data are the subject of research must be guaranteed. Europe must be aware of the need to involve our research sectors, industrial teaching, in this new ecosystem. From the Spanish Data Protection Authority, we are aware of the importance of providing trust to data spaces, trust that can be achieved by understanding the data protection regulations as a work tool to guarantee trust from the design with the necessary transparency and respect for the ethical and social values of our rule of law. And for example, we just come from the international meeting with all the national and regional data protection authorities in Latin America, and we have been working very close to Rafael Juste. He's a leader in the neuroscience space, and he's very involved about neurodata and all the ethical, legal, not only scientists concerns that could be, it's just in the present. So it's just one example of this. More than 8 years have passed since my appointment as a director of the Spanish agency. During this time, we have seen a passage of technologies that have been the subject of analysis and study by the authority and by the EDPB itself. Cloud systems, big data, blockchain, Internet of Things, Internet of Data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, smart cities, e-commerce, drones, biometrics, cookies, 5G, wearables, smart vehicles, voice assistants, cryptography, etc. Even new challenges are in the horizon, like the massive process of neurodata, as I explained to you. It's evident that each of these technologies will land in data spaces. We could say data spaces is a point towards which technology converges in general and on which new benefits for our society will be possible provided that there is an adequate trust environment. Technology outside of privacy tools can become an enemy of our society. Undoubtedly, it's difficult to have deep knowledge of the implication that all those technologies that during the last 8 years we have arrived in our society. But our responsibility as members of the data spaces is to know the impacts of threats that they could entail for our rule of law in general and for the rights and freedoms of each person and group of people. In this sense, control authorities such as the Spanish Data Protection Authority are aware of the need to provide ourselves with expert personnel to identify the threats existing in each technology while proposing practical solutions and advice to guarantee the rights and freedom of natural persons. With this idea, already in 2015, we reflected in our strategic plan the need to build a unit within the Spanish agency that was a benchmark in knowledge of technology and its implication of collisions with the European Fundamental Rights Framework. Today, our Innovation and Technology Division, whose staff participate in technological debates within the EDPB, coordinated by our International Relations Division, whom we could call our permanent representation in the EDPB. However, These prevention policies, in terms of rights and freedoms, still require an effort of dissemination, sometimes didactic, that allows to land in our companies and citizens all the prevention measures, and is here where another of the human teams of the Spanish agency comes to take over in this important task. I refer to the General Subdirectorate of Promotion Authorizations, where minors and citizens are the object of our special attention. Unfortunately, there are occasions where prevention fails or has not been taken into account, and this is where the powers of the control authorities are exercised. In this case, by the human team of the General Subdirectorate of Data Inspection. They are necessarily forced to make the permanent effort of updating themselves in the technological field, and will soon have the challenge of identifying responsibilities within a complex ecosystem of spaces of data. Remember that we speak more than 20 European data spaces, which implies an exponential increase in the complexities and in inspection actions in view of the coherence effort already required by the GDPR with the rest of the European authorities. There are many challenges that we will face in the context of data spaces. However, the opportunities are infinitely greater than the challenges that, among all stakeholders, we will have to address. If something should characterize the data spaces, should be the collaboration between all the stakeholders of the same data spaces. And we hope that this meeting would be a good example of this collaboration. It will be necessary to integrate in this collaborative space not only the stakeholders involved, but also the interested parties or associations of interested parties, data subjects, that in no case can be let out because the ultimate objective is not the protection of data, but the protection of persons against an organization or a governance model that could be blurred into an indefinite amalgam of participants. There is no doubt that the response to this call is nothing but the expression of the great interest and concern of collaborations that both public and private sectors feel in this new context of public-private governance. From the Spanish Data Protection Authority, we are aware that the GDPR cannot be understood like a minimum of formal compliance or just paperwork. For that reason, we have worked to provide the Spanish society with the means to avoid that. When everything fails, in particular the security measures, the damage is minimized. Limiting ourselves to strict compliance is not enough, and it's necessary to design alternative channels that outline and allow the involvement of all stakeholders of the data economy. In this sense, we started working on the design of agile channels, alternative to mere compliance and effective for our citizens. One of our main concerns was the immediate withdrawal of illicit consents on the internet, and we create a pioneer initiative in the world, the priority channels. That was the result of having all the agents involved, social networks, public administration, all the main international companies, to implement a mechanism of rapid withdrawal of the special and very important contents that can suppose a damage to data subject. For example, disseminating sexual content without the consent of the people affected. From the operational point of view, having the resource implies that participation of a group of expert inspectors at the agency that will value in less than 24 hours the complaint, and then after this validation, I order the withdrawal of the contents, and we have a tax of acid of 90% in just few hours. But to promote this channel, further actions are still implemented on the media and through organizational measures and compromises such as the Pacto Digital, which may be understood as an initiative aimed to strengthen the right to data protection while promoting innovation and sustainability. The development of the project has had the collaboration of some of the main business organizations, foundations, media associations, and audiovisual groups, more than 400 entities in our country, the most important entities from the private sectors. And it's open to organizations willing to assume the commitments reflected in the letter of adhesion, and it's only open to entities regardless of their corporate form. To conclude these preliminary words, I hope that this event will contribute to set up links of collaboration among all stakeholders that will have the opportunity to express their vision of data spaces during the afternoon working tables. For me, it's a must to say that all your views and approaches will be important. and I hope to reflect them in a final summary report that will outline future actions. I also hope that you will enjoy your collaboration and hope to see you again collaborating in future initiatives. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Mar, for your kind words. Let's go to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Prokopios Drokaris from ENISA. Dr. Prokopios Drokaris is a cybersecurity expert at the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA, working in the area of privacy and data protection and the EU Cybersecurity Competence Centers, where he is appointed as a Deputy Data Protection Officer. Before joining ENISA in 2015, he was involved in several European Union-funded research projects in the greater area of information security within the Hellenic Ministry of Citizen Protection, and he held teaching assistant position in higher education institutions. So, Mr. Prokopios, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome everyone, both joining us here in person or the remote participants. I would also like to thank Ms. Mar España and all the AEPD colleagues who have supported the organization of this event on behalf of ENISA and my good colleague Javier. The official reason or the more formal reason why we gathered here today can be perhaps the fact that the Data Governance Act has entered into effect since September. However, as one of the fellow speakers that you will hear today was saying yesterday during an informal dinner we have, is that she was trying to explain to her family what the notion of data spaces is, and building on top of what Ms. España said earlier, this is where we thought with the AEPD colleagues that an event such as this one could help us all visualize and understand a little bit better beyond the legal provision. So if you can go back a couple of years earlier, we were discussing about the cloud, and most of us were thinking actually a real cloud without being able to visualize it in practice. So now we're talking about data spaces, and each one of us might have a different perception and understanding of what this data space is, what they're supposed to do, and what would be the actual outcome or service offered. Of course, taking into account data protection and cybersecurity aspects, this drawing, this imaginative drawing becomes even harder to depict. So the aim of today's meeting is to get together here from a very well and stellar lineup of speakers, their views, their imagined pictures of what a data space is and what are the considerations. And at the end of the meeting, also through these workshops, try to get a common understanding which will help us further the discussions that will start taking place onwards September 2023 with regards to how to develop, deploy EU data spaces while taking into account data protection considerations. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully you will enjoy this event as much as we did while planning it with all the AEPD colleagues.
Thank you, Dr.
We would like to say welcome to the more than 150 people that are taking this panel in streaming.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to all of them and to all of you. Well, with this work, we have finished the first, the opening, the starting, or the kickoff of the meeting today, and now I think we have to go ahead with the first panel. I would like to call to Luis de Salvador and Luis Velasco, please. Coming here. This first panel is just to explain, to put in context why we are here today, and what is the relation between the GDPR and the data spaces. No? This is that they are going to tell us about that. What is important, the data protection perspective, when talking about data spaces. For this topic, we have two speakers. Luis de Salvador Carrasco. Luis is the head of the Technological Innovation Division at the Spanish Data Protection Authority. Luis is a member of the Spanish DPA for 15 years. First, he was working as head of the inspection department and later as director of the Innovation Technology Division. That is his current position. Previously, he has been working for 16 years in the Ministry of Defense as head of the radar laboratory and head of the aerospace project and security analyst. He is PhD in microtech electronic and fusion logic, MBA, MSc, and computer engineering, among other postgraduate training. Please, Luis, you have the floor. Okay.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. As you see, I prepared my CV in ChatGPT, and it was great. I feel so comfortable to be here with all of you because I have the feeling that I'm sharing a time with friends, and for sure with true professionals really committed with privacy, and in particular privacy in this topic that is it's our meeting today that is regarding data space. And I want to thank especially to the people that is online, and I want to thank to Luis Velasco, the head of the Technology and Privacy Unit of this European Data Protection Supervisor to be here too. Thank you very much, and to share this session with me. Why to talk about data spaces? The answer could be obvious. Data space is an infrastructure technology that allows us to access the data. And to do so, there are a lot of personal data processing involved in several ways. In the way to implement the data space by itself, but over the data spaces, we are looking for implement several data, personal data processing. Of course, and they must be compliant with GDPR. This is the obvious questions, but there are other questions that I want to show you. First of all is that in our contacts with the different stakeholders in Spain regarding this topic, the topic of the data spaces, they transmit us our claims regarding advice and legal certainty about all the projects and initiatives that they have in hand. The director of the Spanish Data Protection Authority was so sensitive to these claims, and she decided to start actions by the Spanish Data Protection Agency regarding this. But I have to say that it was thanks to the work of the data officer, Alberto Palomo, that is here with us. Thank you, Alberto. That in the initiatives that he put in work to put in contact several stakeholders in a framework so interesting that is the data group that the chairman is Carlos Alonso. And there we have the chance to get the sensitivity too of the different and the concerns of the different stakeholders. And of course, I have to say that it is very important, the title of this conference. We are talking about synergies between data protection and data spaces. And it's something that we have to look for to make an effective implementation, not only about privacy, effective implementation of the data spaces. And it could be done only by design of such data spaces. That's that it's important that before to put in force the many data spaces that we will run here in Spain, but we will be a reality soon in Europe, we need to find such synergies. I can start with a very obvious sentence. Data is the new oil. Everybody says about that. Everybody realized that the data, instead to be something that we need to implement processing, is an asset of the company by itself. the entities, any kind of entity. Public bodies, private companies, researchers need to use assets to implement their processings. There are many kinds of assets. Financial assets, the money, human resources, the know-how, the patents, the facilities, even the computer and the processing power. And all that assets are so important for the company to keep under control and to be used in the proper way to protect the concerns of the stakeholders, the citizen, and even the society. It could be naive to think that any entity will give the financial assets, the human resource, or the know-how about the market without any kind of control to anybody to do anything. It has no sense. It could be a lack of responsibility even regarding the people and their own company, the survival of their own company. Data assets is not different from that, and we have to take into account. In that sense, this is not only the concerns of the private companies. We have to put here the importance that it is the research and activity of the researchers in Europe. Research doesn't mean, or we cannot measure the research power of a country just taking the number of researchers or the budget for making research. When we are measuring the research power of, for example, the European Union, we are talking about patents and intellectual property. This is the index that we have to look for. And in that case, when we are talking about patents and intellectual property, we are talking about a contest with only one winner, the first one that gets it. Then we have to protect the chances of the European researchers to be in the same level of competitions with other areas of the world that could have more resources, human resources, budget resources, to protect, of course, the development of the industry in Europe. But there are more stakeholders here involved. The national countries, the national states, even the own European Union, have to take care of the data assets because it's a strategic asset. And we can talk not only about critical infrastructures. We are talking about some things that are happening now in Europe. Fake news, social manipulation, even the health data. When we are thinking about the health data of our current and the future leaders, representatives of the key people in the institutions of our country, it is a very strategic value. Even the European Union, in the Integration and Regulation of the Digital Market Act, was talking about how important it is to keep the right balance in the market, in the data market too. We have to give the same chances of competition to a small and medium enterprise regarding the big actors in the data market. And we have to keep that balance too. And finally, we shouldn't forget about that. We have the GDPR, and in the GDPR is laid down that the natural person must have the control on their own data. Then when we are talking about data spaces, we are talking about the interest of many different stakeholders. And all those stakeholders need trust and confidence to go into the data market. In that data access sharing market, and pay attention when I'm talking about data access sharing market. How to get that trust? That trust has a definition that we have listened many times when we are talking about data spaces. That is called that data sovereignty. So I will say in Spanish too, to switch to Spanish, soberanía del dato. Because sovereignty, I think that they couldn't imagine a most difficult word to pronounce. But I think that you understand me. Please understand me. What means data sovereignty? Data sovereignty is such kind of trust that I need to go in the data access service market. How to get in the effective and efficient way such data sovereignty? It's when we come to the data spaces. Data spaces should give to all the stakeholders such confidence that will give the trust to go to the data market. Otherwise, it won't work. And the data spaces, when we are talking about data spaces, we are talking about federated infrastructures, open infrastructures, that they have some governance policies, rules, and standards that will implement in an effective way such data sovereignty by means of management tools, legal tools, and technical tools. And I underline the management tools. A very wise lawyer told me once, and I think that he was so wise, that innovation is management. It's not technology. Innovation is management. Technology is a way to implement more or less that management. And when we are talking about such management, we are talking about access to the data. What is laid down in the Data Governance Act? It's laid down a very important definition that sometimes I think that it's forgotten. It's the definition of access. Access is what is thought that they allow the data spaces. And access means use of the data. We should use the data to get information, but it doesn't mean, and it's very clearly written in the definition of access in the DGA, it doesn't mean necessary dissemination or transmission of data. It doesn't mean so. Then how to get it? There are some privacy tools and privacy-enhancing technologies that could do so. And I make the difference because I think that the privacy tools, I insist, are management tools. We can talk, for example, if we talk about privacy by design, we can talk about secure processing environments that are laid down in the DGA and in the proposal of the European data health data space. They are laid down there, but there are more. You can talk about federated processing, computer data strategies, edge computing, synthetic data, privacy by default. We are talking about homomorphic encryption. We are talking about anonymization and pseudo-anonymization too. But this is not the only strategy that we can find there. But we are talking about the strategies of privacy by default, that it is the implementation of the traceability of the data. The traceability of the data is key to implement and to control the life cycle of the data and to apply the access control policies. And of course, we need governance. And in the governance should be defined, because the governance should start defining roles, responsibilities, risk management from many different perspectives, data breach management, and of course, compliance with the regulation and with ethic principles that are so important. The ethics principles is something that we shouldn't forget. In this last paragraph, it looks like I was talking only about privacy. But these privacy tools and privacy-enhancing technologies are dual-use technologies. For example, traceability. Traceability is not only important to implement the consent life cycle that is key too in data spaces. Traceability is key to implement the monetization strategies, the billing strategies in a data market, to implement the control of the intellectual property or the patents, to implement everything that is around of the performance of a contract. Then it's not only useful for data protection, it's a tool to fulfill other requirements of the data spaces. The same like the privacy by design tools. The privacy by design tools are capital to give, are key to give confidence about who is using my data, for what purpose, what kind of information they pretend to do, to extract. They fulfill, they are compliant with the regulation, they are compliant with a minimal ethic principles, they are compliant with the protection of my society like a whole. And this is something that it is possible to implement too with the privacy by design tools. What it means, that if we are thinking that we must to implement privacy to be compliant with the GDPR, the same privacy tools, the same strategies are useful to implement all other requirements that come from other stakeholders with other purposes. But it could work only if we implement them by design. If we take into account in the inception of the data spaces that we have such tools, and we have to use that tools with synergy. Synergy or synergy? I don't know. Anyway, we have the chance to create something that will work in an effective and efficient way, saving resources, and that fulfill the purposes of the data spaces and the purposes of the privacy regulation. Because governance could be only one. Some people think that they could put governance for one purpose and governance for other purpose and governance of privacy. Governance is single, unique, only one governance, and it must integrate all such requirements. And that is because it's so important that from the beginning of the inceptions of the data spaces to be the implications and the work of the data protection officers and the data protection specialists, but not any kind of data protection officer or data protection specialist. Data protection officers and specialists that they have a deep knowledge about data management, data science, technology, and of course, public and administrative law. This is the profile that we need to integrate. When we are talking about data spaces, it looks like this is something that we will have to face in the future. But if we pay a little attention, we can see that we have two important data spaces running right now. One of them is, for example, the Smart Grid Initiative. The Smart Grid Initiative that I think that started in 2013, it is a data space. The citizens, we were aware about that because the smart meters that they install in our houses. But it is a way of access to data of the users and different producers, distributors, and commercialization of electric energy. And it works like a data space in that market. And we have to remember the promises of that initiative. Sustainability in the electricity production, stability of the electricity market, and better prices. I can give you another example of another infrastructure that is working like a data space, and in this case, an uncontrolled data space. And it is the digital market. The digital market, the digital marketing. The digital marketing. The digital marketing, if I talk about DSPs, SSPs, ad exchange, and advisor real-time bidding, that is another kind of data space. What I want to point out with these two examples is that we have some examples to learn about and to extract some lessons and tips to what we have to do in data spaces. I want now to finish and give the floor to Luis. Because I think that we planned this session to make it so easy for you, because Luis, you have no problem. To finish, something that is laid down in the GDPR. The GDPR lays down, I think that I'm not sure in Recital 7, that the GDPR is thought, and the data spaces should be thought to give control to the natural person about their own data, to give a legal certainty to the stakeholders in the data market, and to give trust to move this data market. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Luis, the first. And now we are going to talk about Luis the second. Luis Velasco is the head of the Technology and Privacy Unit at the European Data Protection Supervisor. Luis is the head of the Technology and Privacy, the EDPS, supervisor since 2022, when he joined the EDPS. This unit ensures that the work done by the EDPS in policy and supervision accesses currently the technology implications for personal data protection. He has a 25 years career managing the operation and launch of large-scale IT projects in different sectors: industry, management, consultancy, academia, Spanish public administration, and European institutions. He is telecom engineer by the Polytechnic University of Madrid, MS by the University College of London, and MBA by the Instituto de Empresa. So, Luis, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to start my intervention by expressing the gratitude to the Agencia Española de Protección de Datos and also for the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity for the organization of this event, Data Spaces in the European Union. It is great to see how this event has brought together experts, stakeholders, and professionals to discuss critical aspects of data spaces. Also, I would like to mention the work done by the Agencia Española de Protección de Datos with their publication, Approach to Data Spaces from GDPR Perspective. I think this document stands as a very good reference for anyone seeking a comprehensive analysis of synergies, challenges that arise when applying GDPR principles in the realm of data spaces. Luis has made a fantastic introduction about what a data space is and which are the desirable features it should have. He has talked about the important things to drive trust, particularly in the design phase. We have heard about the tools that are required from management point of view, from legal point of view, and from infrastructure point of view. Also, about the importance of doing this with a privacy by design by default mindset. Later, we will see some panels where European data space initiatives will be discussed. Also, we will see the interplay between the different legislations that are created to regulate data economy, and we will see some initiatives of national data spaces. On my side, I will concentrate my intervention on the question why we speak about GDPR when talking about data spaces. Also, I will try to bring a quick overview of the different initiatives that the European Commission is bringing to regulate data economy and which is the reaction from data protection authorities, particularly the EDPS and the EDPB, to such initiatives. Let me start by going back to data economy and the importance that it has and is going to have. Taking the numbers of the European Commission, it is expected that data economy will represent around 6% of the European Union gross domestic product. This means 830 billion euros by 2025. Also, it is expected that it will give employment to 11 million professionals in the area. That economy stands poised to become a colossal vortex of growth, akin transformative waves we have witnessed in historic economic revolutions. Yet, just as with any expansive surge of development, it demands prudent regulation. We cannot allow this area to devolve into a Wild West scenario. As we navigate this new frontier, our belief is that fundamental rights must take precedence, ensuring that progress is balanced with ethical considerations and the well-being of individuals. In the late 19th century, the gold rush transformed the American West. Prospectors and pioneers ventured into uncharted territories, driven by dreams of prosperity. But it wasn't just about staking claims and striking gold. Towns sprouted up, civilization, railway networks, and overall, the rule of law became the main factor. What started as a wild frontier soon evolved into structured communities with rules to ensure fairness and order. Today's data economy is akin to that gold rush. digital landscape teems with potential. Yet, as those pioneers require boundaries and regulations, we need to create controlled environments where that economy can thrive, but under fair rules of play. In this context, the idea of data spaces sounds very appealing. At the end of the day, the goal is to create a safe, regulated environment where data can flow freely, data economy can flourish, but at the same time, fundamental rights are upheld. This idea and this concept sounds very appealing for all the stakeholders, policymakers, industry, citizens, and why not say also data protection authorities. In fact, data protection authorities have to play a very important role. They are called to protect the most valuable assets in this gold rush, which is personal data. And when talking about personal data, the metric to measure if a data space is safe and trustworthy is the GDPR. That's the main reason we talk about GDPR and the interplay between data economy regulation and the GDPR when talking about data spaces. Indeed, establishing limits from data protection point of view is essential. Without robust data protection, there is a risk that data holders might be tempted to indiscriminately collect vast amounts of personal data or process them with due respect of data subject rights. GDPR is a necessary enabler, but let's not fool ourselves. It will not happen as a love story for all the players. GDPR imposes data holders some limitations in the way they process the data. That can reduce business expectations and also can imply some more costly implementation, and in some cases even can prevent some data monetization. One particular example is the function creep tendency that we see in some data holders. They try to obtain as much data as possible and store as much data as possible independently of the data processing at stake. This happens in many sectors. We are seeing this happening in smart meters. We are seeing that in financial services, medical devices. But let's be clear. This directly contradicts the principle enshrined in the GDPR, necessity and purpose limitation. Getting the right balance between the flexibility needed by businesses and the fundamental rights upheld is crucial, but at the same time is not easy to achieve. Striking the correct balance between fostering innovation and safeguarding individual rights is no small feat. We should encourage, on one hand, responsible data utilization and prevent misuses. And this is particularly challenging in an evolving environment like the one that we have with the data economy. With this, let me now go to the different initiatives that are being launched to regulate data economy and which has been the reactions from the DPS. Let me start with the data strategy document from February 2022. This document stands as the one that presented data spaces in the arena and put together some elements that will be key in the next legislations. In principle, data spaces are called to be implementing the European Union vision for a unified data market which extends beyond immediate economic gains and also upholds fundamental rights. Data spaces should be the tool to create secure, dynamic, attractive data economy by establishing transparent rules for data access and reuse. This includes investments in cutting-edge technologies, tools, infrastructure for data storage and processing, collaboration in building the European cloud capacity, and the creation of a European-wide common interoperable areas. Also includes the creation of 10 data spaces. As well, this document acknowledges the importance of empowering users with rights, tools, and skills to control their own data. In summary, data spaces should be able to allow data to flow within EU and across sectors, but also European rules, in particular privacy and data protection, as well as competition law, intellectual property, should be respected. The rules for access and use of data should be fair, practical, and clear. What was the opinion of the EDPS to this? All this looks good. So, in fact, in June 2020, the EDPS published an opinion where indeed welcomed the ambition to create the European Union as the most attractive, most secure, and most data agile economy in the world, but at the same time gave this early warning. Big data comes with big responsibility, and therefore appropriate data protection safeguards must be implemented and applied. European data spaces should serve an example of transparency, effective accountability, and proper balance between the interests of data subjects and the interests of the society as a whole. And overall, that GDPR and the interplay with it must be kept. Regarding to the implementation of this data space and this data strategy, the first element was the Data Governance Act that was mentioned before. It was proposed in November 2020, it was adopted in June 2022, and as mentioned before, it will become, or has become applicable since September this year. It can be summarized as a complement to the Open Data Directive and regulates the reuse of the data, the protected data that is held by the public sector. Indeed, public sector holds vast amounts of protected data because of personal data, but also because it could be confidential or commercially valuable. This data cannot be shared using open data rules. It requires a specific instrument. This was the instrument that was created with the Data Governance Act. It is a cross-sectoral instrument that boasts data sharing through the regulation of novel data intermediaries and encourage data sharing for altruistic purposes. It establishes also technical and procedural requirements for public sector to ensure the privacy and confidentiality of data in situations where data is shared. Member states must equip themselves with the necessary tools and solutions in terms of privacy by design, including anonymization, pseudo-anonymization, secure processing environments to protect data during the reuse. Contractual means, such as confidential arrangement, may also be used to safeguard data. In cases where a public sector body cannot grant the access, because of consent issues, it should assist the reusers on obtaining consent from individuals. The EDPS, this time jointly with the EDPB, acknowledged the legitimate goal of promoting data availability and strengthening data sharing across the EU. However, it considered that while the GDPR aimed to reinforce fundamental rights, the Governance Act has all the emphasis just in facilitating economic potential of data reuse, and has some inconsistencies with the GDPR. In particular, some aspects with regards to the definition of the scope and the principle of lawfulness established in the GDPR were called for clarification. Also, some elements on the creation of new bodies for supervisory and regulatory powers are seen as an element that could create an even more complex model for the implementation, as they overlap with data protection authority powers. Before we were talking about single governance, this is something that indeed can make it much more complicated. The next proposal I would like to speak to you about is the Data Act. It came in February 2022. The Commission here seeks to establish and harmonize rules for the processing of data generated by a wide range of products and services, including Internet of Things devices, medical devices, virtual assistants. The idea is to make this data available from data holders to data recipients, and also to make this data available from data holders to public bodies in situations of public interest. Shortly after, in May 2022, the EDPS, also jointly with the EDPB, published an opinion which emphasized that any access, use, or sharing of data or by entities other than the data subject must comply with data protection principles and rules. Moreover, privacy by design and by default principle should be the starting principle for the definition of products. Therefore, to start with, the devices should store and process as little data as possible. Sharing should only happen with the consent of the user. The EDPB and the EDPS asked to impose limitation on restriction the use of data generated by these products or services, especially when such data could reveal private information or pose risk to the data subjects, rights and freedoms. They recommend introducing clear limitation, particularly in some purposes: direct marketing, employee monitoring, insurance premiums calculation, and credit scoring. Finally, also one element that called for the concern of the EDPS and the EDPB was the transfer to the public authorities in case of exceptional need. It was called for a stricter definition of what means exceptional need scenarios, and also which are the public bodies that can be requesting this data. Finally, I would like to comment about the European Health Data Spaces. It was presented in May 2022, and is one of the data spaces that was announced in the data strategy. I think it's one of the most complex one. The reason being that health data is particularly protected by the GDPR. Indeed, the health sector presents unique challenges to the sensitive nature of health data. Health data falls under the category of special categories in the GDPR, and this requires stricter privacy and security safeguards. According to the proposal of the Commission, the European health data spaces should cover those two areas. On one hand, should allow individuals to have a better control of their own health data and allow them to have movement of the data within their home country and also other member states. But also, the regulation establishes a legal framework for using health data for a limited set of purposes, such as research, education, public health, policymaking, and personalized health care. This is what is called secondary use, where more concerns appear. Indeed, researchers and institutions or healthcare providers could access data for specific purposes with permits from health data access bodies. European health data spaces connect these access bodies to a decentralized EU infrastructure for this secondary use. The opinion from the EDPS, again, together with the EDPB, express a major concern on this secondary use reflected in Chapter 4 of the proposal. The EDPS and the EDPB acknowledge the potential of these secondary uses and the benefits that could arise for them, but at the same time emphasize the risk to individual rights and freedoms that this further processing may entail. They also express that in the definition of this secondary use, there is a definition of the description of the rights that somehow rewrite the rights as defined in the GDPR. This could lead to legal uncertainty to individuals. The quality and sensitivity of the health data generated by wellness and digital health application was also one area of concern. The EDPS and the EDPB argue that this application produced vast amount of data, some of that of doubtful quality, which somehow can be very invasive and revealing sensitive information of the data subjects. As a result, they recommend excluding such data for secondary use. The EDPS and the EDPB also express some concerns over the concerned model of the proposal. Again, new bodies appear overlapping the competencies of data protection authorities. Data protection authorities should remain at the sole contact point for individuals concerning data protection issues. With this, it's time for me to start concluding. I hope I have given you the reasons why GDPR is very relevant in the context of data spaces. Also, the efforts that are happening at this moment on the regulation of data economy and data spaces at the European level, and the position of data protection authorities, and particularly EDPS, on them. Let me say that even there are some concerns, European data protection authorities welcome the idea of data spaces. They are seen as a complement that can put together innovation, economic growth, and fundamental rights. And in this context, data protection regulation and innovation should not be seen as adversaries, but essential complements in a progressive and democratic society. The protection of fundamental rights, particularly the right to personal data protection and privacy, is a cornerstone of our society that fosters trust and social cohesion. Fundamental rights must take precedence as they safeguard individuals from potential abuses and injustices. In the context of data spaces, respecting and upholding these rights is not a hindrance, it's a vital enabler. Striking the right balance between innovation and this uphold of the rights is not an easy challenge. They require a meticulous consideration when crafting legislation and promote data utilization while preventing misuse. The different initiatives of the European Commission share these principles and are a great step forward in the regulation of data economy and particularly these data spaces. Still, in the opinion of data protection authorities, there are some elements that are called for improvement, particularly in the interplay with the GDPR. The result should be more protected set of rights and not a diminished set of rights. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Luis, for your presentation. I think that the time ran out and that we have some delays in the agenda. So we are going to just go to the next panel. Please, Xavier. We don't have time for make question. I think that just at the coffee break, we will have time to speak with the speakers. So, the next panel will be dedicated to the European Data Space Initiative. It will be the way to provide you the current picture of the situation related with data spaces along the European Union. So for that, we will have a panel with Xavier Lareo. Xavier Lareo will be the moderator of this panel. I'm going to introduce him, and then he's going to introduce the other speakers. Xavier is the head of the sector and technology monitoring and foreseeing of the European Data Protection Supervisor, which he joined in 2017. A member of the International Artificial Intelligence Task Force. He provides advice on technology development, having an impact on privacy and data protection, contribute to policy papers, and take part of the EDPS supervision activity. Among other topics, he focuses on biometric data processing, artificial intelligence, anonymization, and online tracking and profiling. He graduated as a computer engineer and started his professional career in software development. From 2007 and 2017, he worked as data inspector at the Spanish Data Protection Authority. Actually, we make some enforcement action years ago together. So, Xavier, you have the floor, and the panel is yours.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. I'm sorry we are a little bit late, so I will try to be brief for once, because those who know me know that I'm quite chatty. So I hope that we have assembled an interesting panel. We will have three different perspectives. We will have first a panelist who regretfully cannot be here in person because at the very last minute he had to make it online. So that's the first perspective will be of the legislator. We will have somebody from the Commission speaking about the data spaces in general, and most specifically about the European health data spaces. Most of the panel will be devoted to European health data spaces because I don't like speaking about things in abstract. And European health data space is the one that is more advanced, is the pioneer of the data spaces. So after our first panelist that will provide, let's say, the legislator's perspective, we will have a second panelist that will give a different view, the one of the civil society. Okay, and then we will have a third view, which is the technical perspective, because speaking about legislation and about civil and fundamental rights is very interesting. But in the end of the day, the data space must reside somewhere, and we need a technical infrastructure that needs to implement all of these nice words that we have on paper. Because as we used to say in the Spanish APA when I was working there, paper stands everything, but then you need to implement stuff. So without further ado, I will present our first panelist. Ove Langveld is a policy officer in the Digital Health Unit of the European Commission's Directorate General for Health and Food Safety, focusing on European health data space. Earlier, he worked in Directorate General for Justice and Consumers in the Data Protection Unit, particularly on digital single market files, health, and home affairs. Before joining the Commission, Ove was a legal officer in the Supervision and Enforcement Unit of the European Data Protection Supervisor. So I think Ove is already connected. Please, Ove. Hi, we cannot hear you. Can you unmute yourself, or maybe the moderator? Ove, try now.
can try, but I am supposedly unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, this at least also people in online hear me if it's not in the room. Okay, but fine. Yes, good morning from Brussels in a meeting in a corridor somewhere in a council building, because indeed, sorry and my apologies for that. On quite short notice, I had to cancel the appearance in person and run away for a short meeting for a short while from a meeting that is going on around 25 meters that way. So then without further ado, let me jump in and try to share my screen. Or just do it the old school way, up, up, up. There we go. Does this work out there? Yes, I see it does. Perfect. Thank you. So what I'll do in this presentation is indeed give a short overview of what the issues are that the Commission wanted to address with the proposal for the European Health Data Space, how it goes about that, maybe also give a short view on where we are with the proposal now, and then finally situate it a bit in the broader context of the data spaces, which are, and I think this is, yes, this is something I can easily say, a quite heterogeneous bunch. There are things like this proposal here, and there are others which are more tweaking existing approaches. But to jump in, so what do we want to address with the health data space? Well, we see a couple of problems in the health sector. One is that although, of course, GDPR access rights exists, people often have difficulties controlling access to their own health data. Because as you know, GDPR access, well, it's the data as it is there. And sometimes you then get a scanned PDF without OCR on it. That does not really help you a lot if you want to share that information with other healthcare providers and so on. That is then the other side, the flip side of the very same coin. Healthcare professionals often have difficulties accessing the health data of their patients. Lewis mentioned that in the introductory speech, both on a national and cross-border level. Even for me here to get my x-rays from the hospital just 5 kilometers to the GP, it can sometimes be a hassle. So that is another part of the story that we are addressing there. And what is a big enabler for that? Interoperability. So that is why we're supporting this in the proposal by work on what is in the end product legislation for electronic health record systems, enabling interoperability on the technical level below there. So those are chapters 2 and chapter 3 of the proposal, and then chapter 4 on secondary use is about access to anonymized or at least pseudonymized health data, both for policymakers, regulators, for proper evidence-based policymaking, and on the other side, also for researchers to unlock the value in that data for further research and innovation. So how do we go about that? On the primary use side, by complementing a GDPR access and portability rights for specific priority categories such as patient summaries, electronic prescriptions, lab reports, by enabling better interoperability there, which should then lead, well, in the very first place, to better health outcomes for patients, but also for cost savings, both on the patient side and on the healthcare system side, by limiting useless repetition of tests if the results can simply be shared onwards from an earlier one. Then on the conformity side, so chapter 3, interoperability and security requirements for the underlying systems, and also harmonizing some requirements there across the EU, because so far what we're seeing is that this is quite a patchwork of how the different member states both do their own requirements. Then we also see quite high barriers to market entry. So in some member states, we really have like very few vendors, with the attendant problems of lack of competition between the providers of these systems. And then on the secondary use side, indeed, making sure that the data can be used, and of course with safeguards. So where do we come from, and what is the kind of background that we're building on? So on the primary use side, we actually, under the current cross-border healthcare directive, already have some cooperation between member states going on exchange of patient summaries across borders, making sure that that prescriptions can be filled cross borders, so you get your prescription back at home, and while on vacation or somewhere at a layover at the airport pharmacy, you can also fill that prescription in a different country. That is currently a voluntary infrastructure and will become mandatory with the EHDS. And this is one example where we're building on existing things, because right now already 11 member states are live in that infrastructure. And actually had a colleague of mine who attended a different event in Spain recently test that. And yes, he could get his medication on a Finnish prescription in a Spanish pharmacy without problems. And afterwards, in his Finnish health system app, saw immediately, yes, this has been filled in Spain. So we're building on that. As I said, 11 member states are already live, and almost all have committed to go live in the next, let's say, 2.5 years anyway. So there's already quite some movement, and we're basically building on that, extending it with further types of data to be exchanged. Then on the conformity side, what we're doing is kind of rather classical product legislation, like we've seen for all kinds of other products, construction materials, toys, you name it. So ensuring that all of these systems that will be sold in the future on the EU market comply with certain security and interoperability requirements that would enable them to seamlessly plug into these larger infrastructures. And now on the secondary use, that's probably the most interesting and likely also the most interesting one for this audience, where we propose rules on how certain categories of health data could be made available for research use. Basically, a list of allowed purposes, applications to be vetted against those purposes, and then you'd have these health data access bodies, so administrative bodies, that are in charge of assessing and granting these permits, then issuing them and making data available. And if we're talking about pseudonymized data, always in a secured processing environment. So it's not a case of just handing the data over to the user for them to use. No, it will always be under the control of these bodies. That was the EHDS in a nutshell. Now, how does this relate to the broader data spaces and in general under the data strategy? As quickly mentioned before by Louis in his introductory speech, so on the one hand, we have these sectoral data spaces. Health is one of them, and indeed out of those that have really advanced, the most high-profile one so far. And for the reasons I also already mentioned, since we talk about health data, one of the more sensitive ones. Things that we're looking on in some of the others, for example, in agriculture, it's more about soil conditions and giving support to farmers to make the right decisions on irrigation, fertilizing, these kinds of things. Energy is also quite interesting one, where one of the things that has already been done there was an implementing act on availability and sharing of smart meter data, because that, of course, will also become, sorry, just letting the guys pass, on new electricity service, such as having maybe your electric car feed back electricity into the grid if it's running low there, and these kinds of things. So there's also pretty interesting work ongoing there. In public administration data space, there are different subparts. One, for example, on making European legislation, and also on national level, plus all the case law that's developed there, be more easily findable and analyzable, including seamlessly across languages. There's also work going on under that heading on increased transparency in public procurement. And as a third subset there, on law enforcement cooperation and working together there. So there's quite a wide variety of different sectoral data spaces, where sometimes we have things that are completely new proposals, say cut from whole cloth, and in others it is more building on already existing parts and just steering them in this way. So as I said in the beginning, it's quite varied bunch there. And what we finally have, and then I will conclude in a second, are certain horizontal support services, where very often these will rely on cloud infrastructures or require certain high performance computing capabilities. So these we will kind of work on horizontally to support all of the other data spaces. That is for me from now. One thing maybe quickly circling back to the health data space. As we mentioned in the introduction, proposal came out May 2022. So where are we now? It's not a toilet seat though. It's a corridor. Anyway, but yes, the lighting is equally flattering indeed. So where are we in the, sorry, that was replied to a comment in the chat. So where are we on the legislative process now? Because maybe, sorry for being pedantic, of course, the European legislator is then European Parliament and the Council. We're just putting in the proposal there. So they are both working very hard on coming up with their respective positions. Council, as I said, 25 meters over there right now. Parliament in their internal discussions, they both plan, and this I can publicly say because they have also publicly said it, plan to be ready in November, and then we can start trilogues, where then Parliament and Council sit together to reconcile their positions. Why is that a trilogue and a dialogue? Well, because we as the Commission are also in the room. So that makes then 3. And the plan, and also both legislators have stated, is that they want to finish this file before the end of the current term of the European Parliament, meaning next spring. So we are in for a hot winter here, but it can be done. So that is it from me. Sorry, I know I'm running a bit over time, but I will stop right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abe. We are very late indeed. Without further ado, we will go to our second panelist, which is Jean Penfrat. Jean is a senior policy advisor at European Digital Rights, where he leads the work on platform regulation at and the EU data spaces. Before joining EDRI, he was a freelance technology reporter at the German IT magazine golem.de and co-founded the Privacy Training Center. Jan, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. European Digital Rights, for those who don't know it, is a European network of over 50 NGOs defending and upholding digital rights in today's era. Digital rights meaning just human rights when it comes to digital regulation and the internet. And we do this through advocacy, campaigning, well, obviously also panels like this one. So thanks so much for having me. The premise that I would like to start my talk on is that the data spaces as they have been proposed, and in particular the health data space, because it concerns very sensitive personal data, represent a fundamental shift from the principles of GDPR. And so if we talk about synergies, I would probably rather talk about how can we possibly make those two things compatible with each other. I've heard the notion at the beginning of data being the new oil. I find this always interesting to hear that, because on the one hand, it feels to me that this analogy is wrong on so many levels. At the same time, there's one level on which I think this is true, which is that when we talk about personal data, it is as toxic as oil. That is why GDPR says that we should collect of it as little as we can, only as much as we really need. The principle of data minimization and purpose limitation and so on, you know all this. So on this, yes, it's true. And it seems to me that when the data spaces have been proposed, the Commission has understood this very well. I quote from a Commission staff document from back then, that among other things said that in the data spaces, they will collect, of course, vast amount of data, and that should only be made available, quote, on a voluntary basis. That reminds us, of course, of GDPR's consent, right, legal basis. And so we were really excited about this, that the Commission understands this very early on. They also mentioned that all of those spaces should create infrastructure that is secure and privacy preserving, which also from a civil society perspective, from a user perspective, a person perspective, data subjects perspective, that is incredibly important. But the narrative that reigns now around the data spaces has tremendously shifted away from that. Now we're talking about data as an asset for companies. We talk about data markets, a strategic asset. That's kind of the words that I've heard this morning. We make the link to the data market created by the DMA, even though the DMA actually says data that is transferred between gatekeepers and non-gatekeepers should not contain so much personal data. We talk about the balance that needs to be struck between fundamental rights and innovation. That sounds like a very, very strong shift away. And from our perspective, and I would probably say from the perspective of fundamental rights law as well, there is no such balance to be struck between fundamental rights and innovation. You can strike balances sometimes, you have to, between different fundamental rights, of course, but innovation cannot outrule fundamental rights. Now, of course, the European Commission continues to say that the health data space in particular, which is, as you know, about very sensitive personal data, is supposed to give more control to patients about how their medical data is being used. And I'd like to shift now to the health data space in particular. That is true for parts of the law. I'm sure many of you have read the proposal and have followed the legislative debate in the Council and in the Parliament. And it's true when we talk about the dashboard that is going to be created under the law, that gives people more control over, that they can see what kind of data is actually being collected, and that the possibility to take out data of those systems and bringing it over to another doctor, for example, even in another country, through interoperable systems. All of these things are likely to give more control to people. But we've already mentioned the secondary use clause in the health data space, which would do the opposite very much. It would take away people's control over their own personal data when it is shared with third parties that have nothing to do with the treatment that is being done when they go to the doctor. I think many of you would agree that if you go to your doctor, that you would expect that doctor to keep your data confidential, wouldn't you? If you go with an illness to your doctor, you talk about the way you live, you give them a lot of information about what could have caused the reasons for your treatment, for your illness. You go to psychotherapy maybe, and that is really kind of the most sacred space and private space that one can imagine to have with a doctor at all. And all of that information all in a sudden under the health data space is supposed to be transferred to a government-run data collection agency, let's call it that way, the research data bodies under national supervision. And then afterwards, these bodies are supposed to make this data available for researchers being defined as literally anybody who can somehow claim a research interest. Now, different from GDPR in the health data space, the data subject, you, doesn't appear in the law at all. Right? There's a data holder on the one side, which is your doctor, and there's a data user, which GDPR would probably call the data processing unit, data processor. And the data subject doesn't appear at all. There's no possibility to object. There's no possibility to even know about who has used that data to what end and for how long. Now that strikes me as a very, very fundamental incompatibility with GDPR, and I explicitly don't say legal incompatibility because I'm not a lawyer, but at least a political incompatibility and an incompatibility when it comes to the principles and the expectations of average people about how their data is being used. Now, that is also reflected in polls that have been run across Europe, where people have been asked whether they would be okay with that being done to their health data. More than 70% people said, no thanks, I would rather not have my data shared that way without being asked. Interesting, most people would said also that they would be fine, that would be done if they had information about how the data is being used for research and if they had control over whether that's being done or not, AKA consent, right? For us as civil society organizations, none of this is really surprising. Obviously, there are strong forces out there who want this data to be used because it is very valuable, economically speaking. We're talking, many people love this talk about data markets, but personal information is not a commodity. It is a representation of our right to privacy, and commodifying it brings us down a rabbit hole that I think very quickly will make our fundamental right to privacy obsolete. So, at a very minimum, to solve this and then to really use the synergies, if there are any, between the health data space and GDPR, we will have to ask people for their consent before we use data. For primary use, I think that's pretty obvious how this is being done. You go to the doctor, you tell them about your health status, and that is the consent that you give in a way, right? So you clearly want that data to be used in order to be treated and then get better. This is the whole purpose of going to the doctor. But for secondary use, this is different. And for secondary use, this should only be done if people are okay with it. And for that, they need to know about it. And this kind of information channel needs to be established by the EHDS. Now, this is already discussed in Parliament. This is already discussed in the Council, at least as an opt-out right, which we have opinions about. But at least I think there is recognition that this is necessary. And I stop here, and I'm very much looking forward to the debate afterwards.
Thank you very much, Jan. Now we will go with our third and last speaker. Could you please put the presentation? Carlos Luis Parra Calderón is the head of computational health informatics of the Virgen del Rocío University Hospital and the head of research and innovation group in biomedical informatics, biomedical engineering, and health economics at the Institute of Biomedicine of Seville. He is a member of the steering committee of the Impact Data Program of the Spanish Research Infrastructure at the Instituto de Salud de Carlos III, and a leader of the Horizon 2020 Healthy Cloud Action that is defining the strategic agenda for the European Health Research and Innovation Cloud. Carlos.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the AEPD, Spanish Data Protection Agency, ENISA, for the opportunity to present this approach of the user, of the data provider also, because I represent not only Institute of Biomedicine of Seville, also represent Andalusian Health Service, a real big healthcare provider, public healthcare provider in Spain. Okay, I have a lot of slides, but only show some key message in every slide, and okay, I try to go very fast. Okay, the idea of my presentation today is present the experience developed in two different projects, one at national level, Spanish level, impact data, and the other is one coordination and support action of European Union. Today is the final General Assembly of Healthy Cloud Project, but I hear. And how can, in the two projects, we have a lot of connection with a lot of Spanish partners are in the two projects, and also the leadership of the two projects is between Aragon Institute of Health Science and the Barcelona Supercomputing Center. Today, I represent the two projects because I also is partner in the two projects. Okay. Impact data. Impact data is one program developed funding by Carlos III National Institute of Health, and it's part of one of the all impact initiative of this research agency at Spanish level, to develop the infrastructure for data for research in precision medicine, or focusing in research, not in healthcare. We speak about secondary use all time. Two key messages, don't forget never. In the pandemic, the science saved lives, data saved lives, research saved lives. Healthcare provider, healthcare professional, heroes, but only soldiers. The atomic bomb is the science. The atomic bomb is the vaccines. To the COVID-19 pandemic, we need research. Okay. Impact developed three programs, one about predictive medicine, other about genomics, and in your case, work in the infrastructure of data science. Impact data finished this year, but we work with the Institute Carlos III with the potential continuity of the program. The idea is create an infrastructure for secondary use of data from the Spanish healthcare system, electronic health record, and other kind of information, imagine genomic repository, and contributes with the knowledge of methodologies produced of the healthcare system. Okay, very quickly. Now we work, in my case, work in the recommendation on sensitive data and impact data. We speak about health data, human data. We developed all 3 years a big discussion and revision, legal, ethical, organizational, and technical aspects, and in the context of the evolution of the legal framework in last 3 years. Also, a big challenge for us is working in the design of the security and privacy aspect of the infrastructure at the same time. It's designed by the security by design during the design of the infrastructure. Very relevant than the need of informed consent, and we developed last part of the project one approach to the specification of the national security scheme or national security framework in Spain to apply this scheme to approach, not directly the situation today for the infrastructure is difficult to apply all the measures, security measures of this scheme, but we consider the best way to make trustworthy infrastructure to use health data. we detect a set of risks, very habitual risks of data, and a big challenge for us. We work in define the data flow in the infrastructure, because in this case only public entities work in the infrastructure, hospitals, data hubs for research, like Centro de Regulación Genómica de Barcelona, or other kind of user for research. And in all cases has, in this case, public entities. And we need define a good data flow to define a good responsibility flow, because at the end we need detect all the transfer, the connection and transfer data between entities to define the map of data processing agreements. Related of the approach to the Spanish national security scheme, in impact data in the infrastructure, the first version of the infrastructure impact data, we define three types of nodes: sensitive data provider, computational provider, and other kind of node with the two types of node. Can provide data and also can process data. We develop a comprehensive survey with all the participants and detect the list, the set of ENS security measures more relevant and more easier to implement, and the first set of measures to apply in the infrastructure. Okay, this is the. Now we work also in one paper to publish a scientific paper, and also at the end of the year we deliver the final deliverable about the situation of this working impact data. The other project is Healthy Cloud. Healthy Cloud is a action to define very quickly one strategic agenda to develop the European Health Research and Innovation Cloud. This is it's very easy to understand all the activity of this action during 3 years. We developed stakeholder forums, developed a lot of deliverables related to recommendation, specification, and now we are in the final days to deliver to the European Commission the strategic agenda proposal by Healthy Cloud to how can implement the European Health Research and Innovation Cloud. Okay. Some highlights related of this agenda. We detect gaps, needs, and uncertainties taken in account in this agenda. Concerns about appropriate resourcing of data sharing in the research sector, measuring in underutilized infrastructure such as health data, EU and EOS. We speak about here about EOS. EOS is the European Open Science Cloud, because the European initiative around open science developed one very relevant strategy, and a lot of European projects with infrastructure to develop one cloud for the open science in Europe, not only for health, but it's a relevant strategy. And at the end, the more important message for my part is we need connect a good connection between EOS and the EHDs, European Health Data Spaces, where how we will connect all the specification on EOS, fair principles, blah, 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 and a lot of work, a lot of infrastructure, and they connect with other European initiatives like European Health Data Space and the other data spaces related with science, because at the end, EOS is for all science in Europe. Some vision or value of Health Research Innovation Cloud. For us, it's very important the need for the confidence with the healthcare providers, because when we connect this kind of infrastructure with healthcare provider, the problem is not only data. The problem is the healthcare. Today, we have, all people know, a lot of cyber attacks for hospitals and blah, blah, blah. When we connect this kind of infrastructure with healthcare providers, at the end, is in the ecosystem of the health information system in hospitals, and the end is a critical infrastructure. The research maybe is not critical, but the healthcare operations is critical. The problem is not only related of data. The problem also is the healthcare operations. And define some kind of service, very relevant. And I think it's important, but I haven't time. And I invite all of you to connect next Friday. We will present online one final event of Healthy Cloud and present the summary of the strategy agenda. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I'm afraid that we are very, very late, so we will have to close the panel here. I know that many of you will have questions to do, but we will have a coffee break soon, and I invite you to make the questions in person to the panelists. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Xavier, for the table. Just I would like to tell you that we have a coffee break, a coffee here prepared for you. But please, we are going to reduce 10 minutes the time for the coffee break in order to catch up the time. We are late, so please, in 10 minutes you have to come back here. Thank you.